I turned the microphone on, so I guess that means we're officially doing something. We're going to continue with some parables. This evening we're going to be in Luke 14 for probably 2, depending on how long we do with the first one. I don't like to shortchange if we want to dig further, but I like to balance it out. They're going to be one more or less after the other, dealing with similar subjects. So Luke 14, if you want to head that way. I'm trying to intermix some well-knowns with some less well-knowns, and we're getting to the point where a lot of them are the well-known, so I'm trying to, we'll come back to a well-known probably next week. There's one of 2 I could do. But in verses 7 through 14, we have the parable of the guests, parable of the wedding feast. That's not specific because there are a lot of parables of wedding feasts, wedding guests, wedding attendants. I mean, there's a bunch of them. This one is only, and the next one are only found in Luke, and they're unusual in a way because parables are talking about spiritual things with earthly things that we're familiar with, right? And a lot of them deal with man's relationship before God, be it in terms of redemption, like the prodigal son, or just preparation for the kingdom of having great value, and so forth. And so the focus on this one might confuse people a little bit, and especially the next one. Let's read through it before I preamble it to death. Verse 7. And he began speaking a parable to the invited guests when he noticed how they had been picking out the places of honor at the table. Okay, he is at a dinner with one of the leaders of the Pharisees, and he kind of does this on the fly based on what he sees. Verse 8, he says to them, when you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for someone more distinguished than you may have been invited by him. And he who invited you will both come and say to you, give your place to this man, and then in disgrace you will proceed to occupy the last place. But when you're invited, go and recline at the last place, so that the one who has invited you comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will have honor in the sight of all who are at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And he also went on to say to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors. Otherwise, they may also invite you in return, that you may, and that will be your repayment. But when you give a reception, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, since they do not have the means to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. And the conversation will continue after that. Kind of an unusual thing to focus on, position, place, and honor. It actually doesn't necessarily translate well into 21st century Western thinking, because there's a major cultural focus for Judaism, especially in the first century, that fits with this. But as is our norm, how about we pull out some of the figures here, and then we can dig into it a little bit. So what elements, what figures, what things do we have in this particular parable? I mean, there's not a whole lot by name, but there's still things in view. Okay, I'll put feast. Yeah, dinner, a meal, a feast of some kind. And I only say that because it's a dinner or a thing of importance. So. What? They have guests. Okay, and then when you say tiers, I'm thinking T-I-E-R. Yeah. Okay. Tiers of position or honor. There might be tiers too when the guy is embarrassed in front of everyone. I don't know, but that's a whole other thing. They have a particular hierarchy at the table. There are research on to the nth degree of how this all worked. Typically closer to the host, I believe it is right hand was the place of high honor, but it also their idea of tables are very different than ours. And reclining at such, they didn't have chairs, they would be low and at an angle. You didn't turn your feet toward anyone, which was a dishonor and all kinds of things. Where you sat was very, very, very important. Do we ever care about that kind of thing today? I'm seeing people shake their heads. I'm seeing people nod. This is fun.
We say we don't have names on the seats, so, but we do. I mean, we're all situated toward the back right now. So people choose where they sit for a reason.
Okay.
Also, if you've had to set up, if you have assigned seats at any kind of like wedding reception, who goes with who needs to stay farther away, and really, and even more, I don't know more so today, but maybe it's emphasized more today because there are so many more, I think, split families
Yeah.
now, and so that person can't be anywhere near this person if you're trying to keep seats for the majority of the dinner.
Yeah, depending on how things split, remarriages, you can have as many as 6 or 8 different clans in the same room. And that gets interesting, especially if there's history. Yeah, assigned seating sounds like a nightmare. But he's describing this at a feast. Now, the Pharisee's at the head of the table. He's the one that's there. He's invited Christ in as the rabbi. At this point, the Pharisees are affording to him a degree of honor and attention, partly because they want to co-opt him. That's going to change, right? But you can imagine him being offered the seat, the high seat of honor, and he starts talking about these things. Wouldn't this be a strange thing to bring up in the midst of this situation? Why are you talking about this? And more importantly, why is Luke recording this? What does it matter where you sit at the feast?
The closer you are to the head table, the closer you are to the person who's in charge.
And why does that matter? Oh, Kanan?
Oh, I think it depends on who's closer to the family.
Okay. It's going to come down to relationships and, yeah, who's close to the family, who they hold value in, and different things. And again, there's a lot of this interpersonal things, and they had their own rules with how they did it that we don't know. It's just kind of, from our perspective, sometimes these are ones we can kind of read over and go, that's interesting, and kind of go, what's he getting at? Now, he will explain himself a little bit more later in the parable. And I guess the question is he talking just about something completely mundane here? Is he just talking about, here's a helpful hint? It's like 7 habits of highly effective people or whatever. Here's a hint for getting ahead at dinner parties. Make sure that you sit here. And is that what he's doing? If that were the case, well, he didn't speak, especially in opportunities like this one, with empty words. I'm not going to say like every possible thing he said was profound. There are probably times when he answered just basic questions in life, but those also weren't recorded. Luke records this, and it has the phrasing, as he puts it in verse 7, a parable. So there has to be a lesson in all this. How does that relate? Is he meaning this to be just general life, or is there a spiritual component to what he's getting at here? Okay, it's an honor to be invited to the feast. And see, this is going to balance with the second one that comes after it. I think that's part of it too. You want to go, you want to be there. I guess it could enter into a question of motivations. Why are you there? If this is a feast, what different let's open up. What different reasons could someone have to go to a social event? Okay? Okay, to make connections or because of connections? Both? Okay. So they're going because they feel obligated that someone wants them there, so they feel they have to do it. That's one. They want to go there in order to network, to be a part of what's going on. Now, what's the motivation there? Is that very is that for others, or is that for you? It's true. What I'm suggesting is it's very possible for people to go to a thing to get what they want out of it. And their type of mindset is they care, first of all, what other people think, so they want that honor. Now, Christ's advice works pretty well on that. Hey, if you want to get the attention, take the lesser seat, and then you'll be called for it and people will notice. Unless that doesn't happen, it requires a lessening of self. There's the word he'll use in verse, 15 when he's explaining it? Or, no, sorry, 12. No, sorry, that's the next part. 11, who exalts himself, humbling oneself, lessening one's position so that someone else can lift them up. Oh, that's starting to sound familiar to something else, actually, a little bit in the New Testament. What other reasons would you have to go to the feast? That's a self-serving one. Can you go because you really care about the family and you want to participate in what's going on and share in the joy of it? Yeah, that's a good reason to go to the feast. This is a, it does say wedding reception, does it? Yeah, wedding feast. So there's a joyous occasion going on. It would be the big event in the particular community. Weddings could take a week to finish. It was an involved thing. You want to share in their joy. That's a less self-serving attitude. A lot of times in these parables, the wedding feast, being prepared, we follow that theme a lot, it echoes the return of Christ and the bride and the bridegroom. So, and I'm not saying this is definitive, but again, it says parable, and he doesn't usually bring things up in just a pithy sense. If this is drawing something grander, and we relate this to the idea of going to the wedding the feast, the person at the head of the table of honor is Christ, the groom, or God, that can change the calculus a little bit as well. Is it possible for people to want to be a part of God's entourage or God's feast for their own self-serving reasons? The attention that comes with it, to network, to be a part of the in-crowd, to be on the right side of history, I suppose, but for themselves? What advice do they need to hear? Humility again. It would take an incredible amount of hubris to walk up to the very front of the table by God or Christ and say, I deserve this position of honor. Of course, a couple of the apostles, depending on which one you look at, themselves, or even worse, got their mommy to try to do the same thing for them. I want to be at your left and your right. You have no idea what you're asking. This theme here, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. And he who humbles himself will be exhausted. Oh, exalted. Well, they might be exhausted too. It's been a long day. The feast is involved. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. It's a good song. And also a reference, I believe, in 1 Peter. Maybe 2 Peter. But see, I think therein lies the idea. The reason I'm trying to pull this on, because a lot of times this is one of the type of ones where we're like, okay, he's talking about wedding feasts to a Jewish audience in the first century. Yeah, they did that then. I'm gonna take his advice and say, well, he said it's cool, but I don't totally understand it. I'm gonna say there's something more to it than just the thing. He is using the opportunity of the thing to teach something more. He's very good at that. Being the perfect, ultimate teacher. Paul was a very good example, one that could do that too, given circumstances. Okay. Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. And who humbles himself will be exalted. And he probably was saying this while in a position of honor, because the Pharisee, the leader of the Pharisees who invited him, the whole purpose of having him there was to help his stature with the community. Oh, come sit at this position. Why would the host want to take someone from a low position and raise them up? Is it just to make that person look good? It is also for them to share in their honor or to see who I got to come. It's an interesting element. What about the second half of it? He turns to the one who invited him. He turns to the host. After saying this, my mind is kind of like, it's one of those situations you kind of wish you could just be kind of there to watch the expressions of how people react to these kind of things. Why would someone invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, all those? Why would they invite them? That seems insane. He's saying, don't invite your friends or your brothers or elders or rich neighbors. Otherwise, they may also invite you in return, and that will be your repayment. Invite the lesser ones. And then they don't have a means to repay you if you'll be repaid at the resurrection. What's he getting at? Huh. How so? It's about self? How so? I'll make you have to dribble the ball a little.
Well, I mean, it would be humbling yourself to invite the poor and
Okay.
versus trying to get status and inviting the upper class.
Okay. How would this Pharisee react to that, most likely? Why? He's a man of God, ostensibly. He's of the, quote, conservative class that knows the law in and out, and plus all the stuff they added to it. He is the religious guy to a T. He has the look. He has the sound. He can do the long-winded religious prayers. He's generous when people are watching.
And that's what it's all about.
Oh, what?
And it's exactly the piece that he says in there. Don't do it so that you get repaid for it. Do something without the hope of repayment except for at the end.
But wait, wouldn't this be the point of all these feasts to begin with? See, not to take away from their general tradition and these families enjoying certain things, but what was a cultural norm became a show, as is the case in a lot of class things over time. They don't just have a wedding feast to celebrate the marriage of a daughter or a son or whatever, probably a daughter, I don't know who's in charge of anyway, doesn't matter. It was to put on a grand feast to invite the others in town so they could see what you could do to aggrandize yourself and to get invited to the shindig when they're ready to. The repayment is just attention, earthly things. How different would it be to invite those who are typically forgotten? Now, what is wrong with the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind?
They don't increase your status.
Okay, why not? I mean, you could be a major philanthropist. You could look really awesome, right? Oh, someone has to know. It'd be a grand show. There's also another part of the equation that we may not fully realize without understanding the position of the way the Pharisees, Sadducees, and a lot of the common thinking of the day went. And for that, we'd have to kind of go outside this section just to kind of lay the groundwork. And I guess I'll allude to, I think it's John 8, John 9, around where he is questioned, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Familiar with that text section? Why is that question completely insane?
One has nothing to do with the other.
They believed it wholeheartedly. They had this notion that if someone was born lame, born blind, born sickly, It was a punishment for sin on the part of someone. Now, how the man born blind is being punished for sin opens up a whole bunch of issues, unless it's some sort of pre-punishment for something he hadn't done yet or different things. A lot of times it was considered a shame of the parents, which is why a lot of times when parents had a child like that, they would get abandoned at best, because it was assumed that if there was something lacking, it was a punishment by God. Why was someone poor? It was a punishment by God. The Pharisees were doing pretty well. The Sadducees were doing even better. They were the gentry. Why were all the religious people doing so well? Well, it was a sign of status. God blesses those who are His and curses those who are not. And they had come to the understanding to a certain degree that a lot of those people are poor, not because of circumstance outside their control, not because of the way they were born into it and they had to beg, but because someone at some point sinned and God was cursing them. That is not something we necessarily get into with this, but was a common thinking of the day. Add to that then the notion of what were the vast majority of those in the first century in the early church who converted? Where did they come from? The lower classes. And among those who were, well, the tax collectors and the prostitutes and those to whom the physician, who knew they were sinners. Not all. There were some of means. Barnabas is an example of someone who gives a lot, and they would share in what they had. But add to that then this elitist notion of, oh, all those people. He went to those people. And then later, oh, those people are claiming him. And here he says, these are the people you need to invite. It's not just that they couldn't give status. They would give negative status if anyone knew, possibly. But they were also some of the people who were forgotten. It's interesting. The repayment would come at the resurrection. The repayment would come at the end. Your demonstration of kindness to those who are helpless or at least marginalized by a society, who are in need of help and various things, giving them honor and attention as people, that'll be remembered by your Father in heaven. That'll be remembered by something more important, because you're showing compassion, you're showing a different heart than most of them had. I wish I could see the face of the guy who brought this crazy rabbi in, because all the people love him. He's doing miracles. He's doing all this stuff, but he opens his mouth and he says all this weird stuff about loving your neighbor and helping each other. What's that about? And notice he just brings it up in the middle of the feast. They're all reclining, the food's coming, and everything. It's like, hey guys, think about this. And it's just like a fork drops, and everyone's like, sure. But was what he was saying primarily, it has importance for them. Was it just for the audience that he was speaking to? Obviously not. Luke recorded it. How does this relate to the kingdom? I don't want to stretch it too far, but if this is like God's wedding and we're trying to bring people to the feast or different things, should we be caught up on our own position? How we're doing? We should pay attention to where we're walking, but should we worry about the honor that comes? Not really. Should we be focused on wanting to take care of each other? And we should help one another, but should our focus be solely on us back and forth? Yeah. Or who we're trying to invite. Who are the ones that God invites? That's going to lean into the second one. I don't know, that's kind of more open rhetorical. Any thoughts?
Question, just as we're thinking through and processing this. We know that Jesus at this time is known as the person who's doing all the miracles. But for the life he lived, did he not already fall in the second section of this more than the first when he was invited to the feast?
Yes and no. and I'm going to put it in those terms. In socioeconomic standards, yes, he's a Galilean, son of a carpenter, which was a fair trade but not glamorous. To be fair, being a tent maker wasn't glamorous for Paul either. His accolades came from his, bona fides came from his academics. But on the flip side, he's got a mass following. So he's that commoner that everyone is following on X, and so he can force his way into the elite circles. What I'm getting at? So that's the balance. He can be torn down in their mind pretty quickly, but he's got the ear of the people. The goal was to co-opt him before to kill him. They wanted to forcibly make him king after he fed the 5,000 because they saw a following there. And there's a suggestion that may have not necessarily, we assume that this group was men, women, and children. I've seen it suggested, given the location, all these things, there's actually 5,000 men, like maybe a proto-militia out there. And the idea being, okay, if we raise him as a king, he can be a standard bearer to fight the Romans. And guess what? He can feed the troops for free. That's their thinking. He rejected that. Okay, well, maybe we can co-opt him into the religious hierarchy. The people don't like us very much generally because we're kind of terrible, but he's popular. Maybe we can, no, now he keeps talking about all this stuff, and he keeps offending us. Notice, this began, the beginning of the chapter says it happened when, in verse 1, it happened when he went into the house of one of the leaders of the Pharisees on the Sabbath to eat bread. They were watching him closely, and there in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy, and he asked, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And then he does it anyway, and he points out if you have an ox that falls in a hole on the Sabbath, you're going to get it out, right? Livestock, you're going to, yes, obviously. So why would saving a life or caring for a need on the Sabbath fall under a different thing? Well, it's labor. Defining a miracle as labor is kind of an interesting thing in and of itself because it's outside the physical. It's there. That's what it set up, and they couldn't reply to him, and then he joins the feast. So he's already set this up with all of this. He's already got them on edge. And he says these things. This is an upside-down way of looking at it. I don't know. This is really weird. How about if we want to shift to the next one? Verse 15, when one of those who was reclining at the table with him heard this, he said to him, blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God. It's like that guest who might be uncomfortable at what's being said, so they kind of toss something out there to try to, let's talk about the weather. Let's just get, let's change that. Blessed it'll be the kingdom of God. We're all about this kingdom of God stuff. We have a different idea of what he's talking about, but blessed will be everyone. It'll be great. Yeah, we can invite the poor too. I guess there'll be a place for them, whatever. It's all good. But then, verse 16, he goes into the second one. But he said to him, this is in response to the guy trying to change the subject. A man was giving a big dinner, and he invited many. And at the dinner hour, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, come, for everything is ready now. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first one said to him, I've bought a piece of land. I need to go look at it. Please consider me excused. Another one said, I bought 5 yokes of oxen, and I'm going to try them out. Please consider me excused. Another one said, I have married a wife, and for that reason I cannot come. Okay, she must be a lot of work. I don't know what he means by that. The phrasing is really strange. And the slave came back and reported this to his master. Then the head of the household became angry and said to his slave, go out at once into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in here the poor, the crippled, and blind, and lame. Oh, that's mirroring. And the slave said, Master, what you commanded has been done, and still there's some room. And the master said to the slave, go out into the highways and along the hedges and compel them to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste of my dinner. Huh. This is weird. What do we have here? We've got some similar elements. We have a feast, a dinner. And you've got invited guests. And then you've got the poor, lame, crippled, etc. Huh. he seems, just remember, this is all one conversation. They're sitting in that room. He's giving advice to the room about humbling yourself instead of making it about you. And then he's saying, you really should be inviting those of need more than just your friends. And the guy's like, well, blessed will be the kingdom of God. Everything will be grand. He's like, okay. And he says this. What is this all about?
About people ignoring opportunities given.
Okay. Now, one thing we should probably focus on, ignoring opportunity. It would be easy, I suppose, to take this as some guy that's kind of just self-important and thinks that everyone should come to his party because it's the best. The implication is they were aware that this was coming, or this was going to be a thing that was important for them to be, and they just didn't want to be there. Why miss out on the dinner? Why not go? Why make excuses? Okay, they didn't like him. What they had going on was more important. What are the things listed? You've got, I bought a piece of land. Earthly concern. 5 yoke of oxen. I got to try them out. Really? You can't do that next week? Checking the piece of land. Can't do that next week? I married a wife. I don't know. I'm going to get myself into more and more trouble. I come on that. You can't come next week. She's keeping you home.
I covered this a long time ago in class. Just all the excuses that were made. Like that old thing you used to like. Oh, I've got to wash my hair that night. It's like, well, maybe you had to wash her hair.
Mm-hmm.
Something, or she was doing his, or whatever. But it literally is just whatever excuse came to mind.
Yep. And the excuse is given. Now, here's the thing. It's a parable. So is he talking just about a thing that happened with a guy and a dinner party that went awry? Or is there something bigger in view here that we're heavily hinting at? I would suggest, if you want to argue it, that's fine because it's not emphatic, but there's hints here of similar things. Those of the east and west coming to sit at the table and the people of the kingdom rejecting, the idea of who were the ones that he came to invite to the kingdom, to invite to the feast, to invite to what his father had prepared. In essence, you could see the feast giver, the host is the Father, is God, and Christ might be the servant, the slave, or the one sent to find people to invite. Pentecost was just to them. And for a period of time until Cornelius, it was just them. They got first dibs. Peter opened. He had the keys, meaning keys unlock locks. He opened the lock to the Jews. He was the one that opened the lock to the Gentiles. Paul did primarily more of the work with the Gentiles with his missionary journeys, but it was Peter that opened the door. That is true, true. Paul would follow a pattern. She is right. He would go to where the Jews were first, the synagogue, except in Philippi, because it was a Roman colony, largely populated with retired soldiers. There weren't enough Jews there, enough families to have a synagogue, so he went down by the river, which is where they would meet. That's where he meets Lydia. Goes to them first, gives them first dibs. Most of the time it blows up in his face. Not so in Berea. Hey, cool. Then he would go to a public place where the rest of the city would gather, typically in a marketplace or the Areopagus, the kind of the center of the city or marketplace, someplace where people would be. Here, if Christ is inviting, and what are they saying? Are they saying openly, oh, we hate that guy, we're not going to go to his dinner? No. What are they doing? They're making excuses. I got to take care of all these earthly things. And so what does he do? He goes and fills his party with those who are willing to come. And it, to a certain degree, it almost sounds like they're compelled to come. Now, that's not saying that the handing one's hand is ultimately forced. The idea is the invited guests had the chance They refuse. He opens the door to the rest that can come. He invited many. We just have 3 that give excuses, but it's not limited to them. The idea is this guy is going from place to place to place, and they're all giving reasons why they don't want to be there. Even though, and this is where it gets fun, if you contrast with the last one, you give a party for all the people that are in your circle so that they'll give a party so you can be a part of it, and that's what you want to do. Who refuses to go to the party? That's the position. That's where you go to show off and all this on it, but they don't want to go to this party for some reason. And it might come down to the host and what it is. You can stretch these things to some interesting places. I don't want to go too far, but it really does get back to if they had a notion of how they wanted it to be, and they found out it wasn't that, didn't meet their needs, they don't want to go. Well, that mirrors the kingdom really well, actually. He says this to the guy, blessed will be all those that are part of the kingdom of God. Well, let's think of who's going to be there, because it may not be you, unless you're willing to go and not make excuses and go to the kingdom as God intends it to be than what you think it's going to be. Okay? Mm-hmm. It is. And the invitation, because of the nature of free will and such, the invitation can be made. But the invitation doesn't force those invited to come. I mean, it does have this compel them to come in. When it says compel, that might be a strong translation. It's just strongly encourage people who may not realize that they would be invited. I don't think the idea is they're going to the highways and the hedges and the hills and the hollers and all those things and just dragging people back. It's like, really? Me? Me? I don't know. I guess. Okay, if you really want me to come, because he wanted the house filled. And it's that last phrase. I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste of my dinner. Now, here's the thing. They might be like, whatever. We didn't want to go anyway. But that means they're going to miss out on something they didn't fully understand that they were rejecting. If this is a feast held by God, it's a wedding feast, or whatever those things, it is that you want to be in there. Once the door is closed, the 10 virgins being prepared, you want to be a part of it. Is it sadder to just be unprepared and miss it, or to know that you were invited and reject it? I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's going to be taken from them and given to the Gentiles. And it will, right after this section, the context gets into tests of discipleship. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father or mother and wife, children, brothers and sisters, or his own life, he can't be my disciple, and so forth. In a different location in Matthew, but it comes right into that whole discipleship. So it's coming down to the choices made of letting go to be a part of what you're being invited to. It's interesting how it all kind of flows together and how Luke has lays it out. So yeah, these two together are kind of a weird kind of balance, because they're going on while a feast is going on, in essence, or at least a meal, and he's given all this advice, and they're like, what? I'd love to know more of their reaction, but that's not the point. Eventually a large crowd gathers, and he leaves, and he's going along with them, and it just builds from there. But a lot of this is here. I don't know. It's interesting. There's a few more things we could pull in different things. I'm just curious what people's thoughts are at this point. He wants that dinner to be full. He wants a full house. He wants guests to be helped. I don't know if this is meant to have that air of the kingdom taken away from him, but it fits really, really well. And what's interesting is Christ's ministry really was focused for the Jewish nation. He didn't deal with Gentiles much. He did on occasion. The weird thing was, it usually was a good experience. Syrophoenician woman, the centurion, possibly two centurions if it's not the same one. Very positive interactions, which is odd because you'd think that the centurion, a Roman military officer, would be just the epitome of the worst to them. It was a centurion that Cornelius went to. That Peter went to, who was Cornelius. I've sometimes wondered if one of those was actually Cornelius, because that would be interesting. So. Any other thoughts? We're about 45 after, but we're good. I liked how those kind of pulled together. I guess, is there anything we need to mention this evening, announcement-wise or such? Anyone need Lord's Supper this evening? Okay. Well, then, no dinners for summer, so meet again at 6:30 for the devotional Wednesday. Beer at 5:30, but you got to have your own grub. All the other things we got coming up and such. So. Okay. John, would you close us in prayer?